it's Petra Manos here, and this is Petra Manos Vintage Knitting. Nice to see you guys again. Now I'll just let you know, this video is probably going to be broken up into small parts. I've been really struggling to find any time to record a podcast episode because I run a business and I have children, so I don't typically get any hobby time until about 8:30 p.m. and I tend to do my knitting from 8:30 until around 10:30 each night, and then a bit on the weekends. So generally, if I have had a chance to record a podcast episode, I try to get my family to go to the movies or something like that. But I don't know, maybe there haven't been many movies on because they haven't been to the movies in like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. So what I'm trying to do is just find 10 minutes here and there. I've kind of borrowed it from my work day already, but I'm just going to try to record a few little segments in the mornings because I've got so many things that I want to share, and I'm worried that I'll end up with a super long episode if I keep dragging it out, and also I'll forget things. So anyway, nice to see you all. I've really been wanting to catch up with everyone. I've been following along with others' podcasts and I wanted to share a lot of things. So first up, I would like to share what I'm wearing today. And this is a finished product, or finished object, I should say. And it is my hand knit Needlewoman 171 resized project. So the original pattern is called cabled jumper coat. And let me just check that that's correct. I don't have perfect memory these days for what things are called. I don't know how everyone else does it. Sorry, cable stitch jumper coat. And this pattern was from the 1930s. And it was originally knit in 3-ply yarn, but for a bit of interest, and well, mainly because I really needed a warm winter cardigan, which now it's spring, so I kind of missed the boat a little bit, but it's still been cold, so it's been valuable. I wanted to have something that was in DK weight. So obviously 3-ply and DK weight are a totally different gauge, but I actually already have a pattern of this already. I really liked the original. It was my favorite for the longest time, and but it's just too short in the waist, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to use my resizing skills and resize this. So I was posting a series of resizing prompts on a Facebook group called Vintage Knitting in the Modern World, and so every week I would post the next stage, and I was like knitting this one as I went along to show an example for resizing. And I was really pleased because at the end this one fits perfectly, and I was so worried that I would be trying to teach people how to resize and then me get it completely wrong, which, you know, isn't unheard of. So so it fits me really well, exactly the way that I was hoping. So essentially I made it long sleeves, but when it's cold, I like my hands get cold, like I get painful hands, so I've made it long enough that I can pull it over my hands if I want to, but it doesn't have to be that long. Like it works either way, which is good. It has this collar, which if I turn around, you would see how that collar goes. So essentially, it's just the back there. The collar wasn't entirely neat because it has you increase and decrease on the edge, and it wasn't such a big deal for the increase, but on the decrease it was a little bit messy. But one benefit of it being on the edge is you can kind of put that down to the selvage stitches being a little bit messy sometimes anyway. But yes, it would have been nicer probably to have a slipped stitch along the side, but it's not a big deal. I've had people compliment me on it already, so I mean, not on the edges of the collar specifically, but I don't think anyone's really going to be picking at that. Yeah, so in order to resize this one, the original had quite a few more cables. As it is, there's lots of cables in this, so it still took me ages. But I had less cables around because obviously each one is wider. And I added, I had to just guess how much to put in the button band, which is garter stitch. And I was a bit worried that maybe I had made it too wide, which I think I said in a previous episode that perhaps I made it a little bit too wide. But now that I've got it on, I'm really pleased with the width that I made it. If I'd made it less stitches, it might have been a bit like gappy. So I think it's just right. And I got these buttons from the Button Bar in Adelaide Arcade in Adelaide, and they're just the right colour, so I'm really pleased. I don't really like my buttons to be too contrasty to the garment, so I like to go and find some buttons that are a really close match. It is a bit expensive then because I'm typically paying like $3 to $4 per button when I buy them from a button shop, but I like being able to match the colour, and like I've just invested a bunch of time and a bunch of money on yarn anyway, so if I'm paying for buttons as well, it is what it is. Certainly it's more economical if I don't make cardigans, and I never really wear cardigans open anyway, so the buttons are somewhat decorative. So I think I do prefer things that are not cardigans for that reason, because I also don't really like sewing them in, like sewing in all the buttons. But actually on that, so the first day that I wore it, it was a bit wonky because I started sewing in the buttons from the top, and I realised that on one side I had actually knit 2 rows more than the other side just in this button band. Now you can't tell at the moment because it's covered by this bow, but there's 2 inches, not 2 inches, 2 rows more on one side. And I had started counting from the top, and then all of my buttons were all out of alignment by 2 rows. And then when I got to the bottom, it became really obvious because one of them's on the part where the ribbing meets the body, and I'm like, this doesn't line up. And you wouldn't think that 2 rows would make much difference, but when it's DK yarn, it is like a little bit of size, I guess. And then the bottom of the garment didn't line up. That was obviously also out by the same amount. And so because of that, I had to redo all the buttons again, because essentially the issue was the whole garment's worth of buttons, so I had to take each button off. And I had spent a lot of time really tightly sewing on the buttons because I don't like losing buttons, so I had done an amazing job of getting the buttons on, and then I had to get them all off again. I was like, oh. But no, I ended up doing the buttons again, and now everything's in alignment, so I'm happy. So I've been wearing it a lot because it has actually been a really cold September. I work from home, and our house is normally pretty cold anyway, but it's, every year it seems that some month is the hottest or the coldest on record, or this month was no exception. So there was a newspaper article the other day saying that this September was the coldest September in 100 years. So yeah, it's been pretty cold in the house. Our house is normally pretty cold anyway, and I've been running the heater, so it's been appreciative having a nice warm jumper. Okay, so something else I need to say about this one. When I dyed this yarn myself, and I haven't said what the yarn is, but I can say now, there's been many episodes before where I've mentioned it. So the DK weight yarn was wool. It's Knit Picks Hawthorn, and it was bare, and I dyed it myself. And then I held it double with along avec Anna in the colour Châtain, however you pronounce it. It's French and I am not French. And so that was all coming along fine, but when I originally dyed the yarn, you know, I don't have room for commercial quantities in vats and things, so I did it in 2 batches. And what I did was I mixed up the dye, stirred it, and then I poured half of it into one, I poured half of it into my slow cooker that I use for doing, it's like an old slow cooker that we don't use for food anymore. And I dyed that, and then the remaining dye went into the slow cooker again for the second lot. But when I got the dye out, one lot was significantly more yellow and the other lot was significantly cooler. And essentially, to make this colour, I mixed orange with blue. So I think that I didn't do a great job of dissolving the colour, and so the second lot ended up with more blue pigment in it, and the first lot ended up with more orange pigment, and it was really obvious. It looked quite patchwork when I finished the project, so I was a bit disappointed with that. Especially like the way I had done it, I had one ball that I was using on one side, a different ball on the other side, a different ball on the back, and then on the arms I was like alternating a little bit. So actually the arms ended up looking fairly even because of alternating, but the biggest difference was like one of the ones at the front was the cooler toned one, and then where it was butting up to the arm it was warmer toned, and it looked quite patchwork. So what I ended up doing was getting the same colours of dye again and mixing up some more of the dye, and I over dyed the whole garment. And I decided to do it cold because I didn't want it to get patchy. So I basically just mixed up the dye in, so I used boiling water to mix up the dye, stirred it really well this time, popped it in a cold plastic bucket, filled it up with cold water, made sure it was cold, and then I slowly immersed the project in there. And then I thought, oh no, I've made a mistake, because I had forgotten to soak the garment in water first. And if you soak the garment in water first, it fills up all the, I don't know, they're not pores in wool, but basically it fills up all the air holes that would be in the wool with water. And then because you've got water in there, it's not going to, the new water isn't going to soak in as quickly because it's already saturated. And I had forgotten to do that, and I started putting the garment in, and the water just soaked into it, and I could see the dye was coming out of the bucket at the same time because the dye was in the water, and I was like, oh no, I'm going to have, like, I was sure that it was going to be much darker at the bottom of the garment and then much lighter at the top. So I was really disappointed, but I just stuck the whole thing in there, dunked it around, poked it a bit to, you know, not with my hands obviously, but with a poking stick, and it was cold, so hang on, it's my Fraggle Rock. And poked it a bit so that it would try to evenly dye, and I was just hoping for the best, and I got it out and it was fine. It wasn't patchy at all. In fact, it was the best over dyeing I've ever done. So, but still, I think next time I'll still try to get the garment wet first, just in case, because I was a bit worried about that. but no, it turned out really, the over tie turned out really even, and now you can't really tell that there was one part cooler than the other because the over dye has kind of evened all that out. Definitely recommend over dyeing cold. Alrighty, well, really it is my work day, so I am going to, I can't think of anything else I want to say about this project other than I'll stand up and twirl around, and then I'll see you next time talking about something else. Alrighty. Oh dear, I don't want to be bunched over like that. You'll just have to see me without a head. Ta-da! Hi again. Now the next project that I want to show you is this one I'm wearing now. It is the jumper on the cover from Stitchcraft 1934, I believe the March edition. And this one I showed you last time, but I had forgotten to add the bows. So it wasn't a finished project then, but now it is. These bows are a little bit fiddly. You actually knit them in stockinette. So you knit 2 long rectangles and then a short rectangle and put them together. And because stockinette curls, they can be a little bit fiddly because you need to block them flat and then hope that they're going to curl in a way that's flattering. So I prefer the bow at the top to the bow at the bottom. I mean, they're both, the one at the bottom even, like, yeah, it just comes down to how it curls because it even looks a little bit smaller to me. It's strange, but essentially they're exactly the same size. And I just knit them on DPNs because you're just knitting like this tiny little rectangle. But yeah, so one thing with this particular project, I do feel a little bit self-conscious wearing this one. I think that I knit this one too tight. And this was visible when I tested it against my template. It was just a bit tight in every direction, really. In particular, it's quite tight around my arms. I am considering, because what I ended up doing, the original pattern didn't work for me. It had you cast on and then knit a few stitches and then kind of leave them dangling and then sew them in later. Sorry, that's a terrible way of describing it. I don't know how to describe it, but it just didn't work for me because the number of stitches they had you cast on and leave to sew in didn't fit my arm size. It just didn't. It was not going to fit. It would have been way too tight. So what I ended up doing instead was I picked up stitches around the arm side and then knit out. And I don't really like casting off rib. I prefer to always cast on rib because I find that it's a lot stretchier. And so the issue that I have with the sleeves, it just feels tight. And so I'm not getting any younger, so it kind of feels like constrictive around a part of my body where now that I'm aging, it's starting to feel a bit baggy there. And then if I'm kind of cut there as well, it's like, I don't know. And even if I started doing weights or something, then it would feel even tighter there. So yeah, I don't know. So I'm thinking I might have to, and I don't know if I'm going to get around to it, but I might need to knit just the cast off edge and then cast it off using a looser method, or even better if I could find some of the scraps, which I didn't really have much left of, so it's probably not going to happen, but if I could find any more scraps, then knitting the sleeve slightly longer would have it stopping at a point that's less likely to feel tight, because this part here is part of the problem, exactly where it stops. Although it is the same part that some of my other t-shirts stop at. In fact, I've taken a t-shirt out, but I had a t-shirt underneath and it stopped at exactly the same point. It's just that that t-shirt was more elastic and it wasn't like cutting in like this one does. It has a snap for the neck, but I didn't feel that the snap was actually hugely necessary. I'm able to get this one on and off without using the snap, which is funny because the neck, I mean, I don't have any problem with casting off at the neck because the neck is usually tighter. It's the places where I have trouble with casting off is at the sleeves and when it's at the bottom. I don't like cast off edges at the bottom. But anyway, also I didn't, normally if it's 120 stitches around on 3.25 millimeter needles, it fits me fine. But for this particular pattern, I'm not sure what happened, but it just feels a little bit tight in the body as well. And also it's probably a little bit short. So I think all around it's just a bit small. But I can wear it, and I did wear it out already. Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say about this one because I did describe it last week, but it's not my favourite because I do find it a little bit close fitting. So hi again. It ended up being another week and a half or so before I could even record another short segment. It has been so crazy busy in my world lately, so if it all seems a bit disjointed, I mean, probably even my hairstyles are changing. I don't know, sorry. In any case, I showed you 2 finished objects already, obviously this one being one of them, and I have also been working away at a whole bunch of other things. So, in particular, you might notice that behind me is a knitting machine. So this knitting machine I have actually had sitting under my stairs for 10 years. And I tried using it a while ago and I didn't have any tuition, and I assumed that because my manual had a little piece, so I don't know if you can see past me, but there was a little piece that was connected to this tensioning bar that just held the wool in place while you were knitting. I assumed that if that was missing that it wouldn't be able to knit. Now it turned out that that particular piece isn't really that important, but I didn't know this. And there's a part in a knitting machine called a sponge bar. My sponge bar was flat, it needed to be serviced, but I didn't really know this either. And I think the main reason why I gave up on it so many years ago was because I couldn't work out how to cast on. And again, I thought it was because of the that little piece on the tensioning rod being missing. So I just stuck it under my stairs and that was the end of it. 10 years later though, I was watching Emily Kate Made This, and she got her knitting machine, and also I've been watching Engineering Knits, and obviously she's got a lot of knitting machines, and I was like, I really wish I could get my knitting machine working. I guess I was having a bit of a complaint about it because I'm not a very mechanically minded person, so the thought of trying to fix it myself just wasn't going to happen, especially I always feel quite mentally drained, and I use knitting as a relaxing hobby rather than trying to be a challenging one. But in any case, I got it out because I discovered that there is a place in Adelaide where I live called Barb's Sew and Knits that services knitting machines. So I was so excited. I essentially took my knitting machine as soon as I realised. I took it down to her shop, and then a couple of weeks later everything was serviced. She only charged me $90. From my perspective, it was an absolute bargain because I just wouldn't have even known where to start, honestly. I just had no idea. So got the machine back, and I admitted to her at the time that I had no idea where to even start. And so she gave me a little bit of tuition on how to use the machine, which I just found really, really helpful. Anywho, so I got it home, set it all up, absolutely excited, went to cast on. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure it out. I spent 3 hours trying to cast on, and then I realized that I was just doing something very simple that was wrong. And it was probably the whole reason that I hadn't been able to use it in the first place. Essentially, my machine, I don't know all the terms for all the things, but my machine comes with this nylon thread, and I'm supposed to use this thread to put some tension on my knitting stitches when I first cast on. And if I don't do that, then all the stitches fall off. And it's got nothing to do with this little tensioning bit that's on the rod, because when I took it over to Barb Sew and Knits, she set it up and was knitting without that even being there. I just needed to use this cast on method. So eventually, after 3 hours of frustration, I got it working, and I was super excited that I was able to start creating knit stitches on my knitting machine. And part of the reason why I wanted to get a knitting machine working is because with my work and family commitments, I don't feel like I can make anywhere near as much progress on the projects that I want to do as I would like to. There's so many different projects I'd like to cast on, and the reality is I can probably only make 6 things in a year. It takes me about 2 months to complete a project by hand, but some of the things I've been doing this year have been Fair Isle and, well, not technically Fair Isle, actually in the Norwegian colour work, but stranded colour work in any case. And it's very, very time consuming. So not that I would necessarily do that on the machine, but the other components that are simple to do, like stockinette and all of that, I figured that I could speed up some of those parts so that then overall I would be able to make more of the things on my list that I'd really like to make over time, rather than just plodding through very slowly. So that was the idea, but we'll see how we go on that. What I have discovered since then is that a lot of the types of patterns I like from the 1930s, 40s and 50s do have texture on the patterns that I can't necessarily recreate with a knitting machine. But I have, since getting this machine fixed, I have also looked into some other machines. Here I am just saying that I've got... Keep in mind, it's been a couple of months since I recorded, so a lot of these things have been going on behind the scenes and I just haven't put in an episode. So I've purchased one machine, but then I ended up, I might have purchased another 2 machines already during that time. There was a lady about an hour drive from me who was offloading 2 machines at once, and she was selling them as a job lot. Anyway, I'll get to that later. So I've got my machine up and running. After I spent the 3 hours casting on and finally figuring out how to do it, I got to work on making something. And I honestly thought that for my first project, I just wanted to make a rectangle. I didn't want to do any shaping or anything. But I don't like plain stockinette. It's just, I don't know, I just don't find it very attractive. So I decided to add some colour work. So I have been, I don't know if you can see this, but I've been working on this. Now, for a first project, I'm happy with it for a first project, but there's a couple of things that I noticed. First of all, the yarn itself, I'm using Colour Mart cashmere. Might have it written down. All right. It's the 836 NM fine fingering weight cashmere in chestnut. And this yarn is actually not that beginner friendly, I discovered afterwards, because it's actually a very slippery, drapey kind of yarn. It doesn't really stick together, so if you drop a stitch, it just so, but for the most part, I did a rectangle here, so I didn't really drop many stitches on making the garment, but I certainly did when I've started making sleeves. So so there's that factor, but also I don't know if it's because I've had this yarn for a very, very long time in stash, but it biases slightly. So I don't know if you can see on the front, but on the back, actually you can see it on the front as well. Essentially, can you see how the seam is visible on the back? And it's because the yarn itself is biased a little bit, and so it spirals. So it's not really, really bad. It's only about an inch or so down the bottom, but it doesn't, and it, to be honest, when you're wearing it, it does kind of fix itself, but it has a tendency to bias. And I've noticed this before with colour mark yarns. I'm not sure if it's a property of the yarns themselves, or if it's a property of being stuck on a cone for a long time, sitting in a stash. What I might need to try doing is, I don't know, maybe I can wash the colour mark yarn and then put it in. No, I don't really want to do that, you see, because colour mark yarns come with knitting machine oils already in them. That's actually one of the benefits of colour mark in the first place if you're a machine knitter, because they come pre-oiled. They are actually machine knitting yarns. I've been using them for hand knitting, but typically I would typically knit them with that machine oil still in the yarn, and then I wash it at the end. So I don't really want to pre-wash it, but certainly the biasing is a bit of an irritating thing. And then my machine doesn't have a ribber, so I knit this ribbing by hand at the bottom, and I like to knit bottom up, and it's because I like to cast on the hems rather than casting off on hem. What I find, if I cast off in the hem, one of two things happens. Either the hem itself is too tight, or if I add stretch like I did here, so if we look at it again, if I add a bit of stretch to the bind off, what I find is the hem looks a bit sloppy. Like it just kind of looks, it's not an issue when it's worn, but the hem, it's especially the case on the back, because I added a few more stitches just when I was binding off on the back, but it kind of creates this ripple effect, and I haven't really worked out how to bind off in a way that either does not ripple and is not too tight. I know you can do Jenny's surprisingly stretchy cast off, bind off, but I just don't find it attractive, and I still find that it ripples on that as well. So what I typically do is in the row immediately before casting off, I usually increase in the rib. So I don't know if you can, yeah, you really can't see, but essentially every now and then there's an extra purl stitch in this. So depending on how wide I want it to be, I would add an extra purl stitch every 4th purl, 8th purl or 12th purl. And in this one I did every 12th on the front, and then I decided it was still too tight a bind off and I did it every 8th on the back. And then At the front here, I used some leftover Manos del Uruguay Fino to just do, you probably can't tell much because I didn't have a strong contrast in colour, but I just used a little bit of what I had to add a little bit of colour work, and I added a couple of buttons. And then I did make a mistake as well. Yes. So in previous episodes, you've seen that I've got a template. I'll show you. This has a bit of knitting on it, but I created a template, which you've seen, and I discovered a mistake, which actually I didn't even realize the entire time that I was recording the video about fit, but I measured the waist 1 inch lower than my waist actually is, and also I think I've lost a little bit of weight as well. So when I went to measure it against my body, it was too long. It was about 2 inches too long, and so the this bit of the ribbing kind of sits 2 inches below my waist. And when it's completely finished, I'll put it on and I'll show you. But I re-measured myself, and I don't know if you can see, but I ended up drawing new lines because my old lines were a little bit wider than I am now. And then I've just redrawn my waist because my waist should have actually been here, but I had it out there. And these, even though it's only a small amount of weight loss or size difference, the outcome is that when I measured how tall to knit this, I stretched it to the size of my template, and then I concluded how much I needed to knit, and ultimately I knitted too long. So I know now, and it should be fixed for next time. But anyway, I tried it on, took a photo, and asked on Instagram and on Facebook what people's opinions were. Should I just leave it sleeveless or should I add sleeves? And the vast majority of people suggested short sleeves. Now, I didn't really have much yarn left, and I've only got about 25 grams left on this cone, and I had about 50 grams. So I'm playing yarn chicken. I think, oh, actually, no, I knit a sleeve, weighed this, subtracted the value of the cone, and it looks like I'm going to have 0.5 grams left over when I'm finished. So I'm going to be cutting it very fine, but that's how we like to do things. I seem to play yarn chicken a lot. And what I have done, so I have knit this sleeve, and what I've done, I've just bound off at the top in waste yarn, so that worst case scenario, if I get to the very end and I'm in a pickle, then what I can do is undo a bit and then get my contrast, or get this other yarn and put a little bit of stranded knitting at the top, and that will solve the problem. So we will see how it goes, but I am thinking I might be able to just make it because I've also got a small swatch that I can undo. Yes. So this ended up being a challenge, the sleeve, because this is the first time I've needed to shape anything on the machine. This entire thing is all just one rectangle. So it's literally a rectangle, and then I just cast off at the top, and it's a boat neck. But this required shaping. So what I did first was I hand knit the ribbing because I don't have a ribber. And oh, actually on this, so I have this book that came with the other two knitting machines that I found, and it's really helpful. So I've got like a whole lot of these things, and And essentially, they're all designed for a particular ply of yarn. So this says 5 ply, but at the end of the day, it's not so much about how many plies it's got, but the gauge that it has. So according to this book, so according to this book, 5 ply knits up at 14.5 stitches to 2 inches, which is essentially 29 stitches per 4 inches. And a typical gauge that you see on hand knitting garments is 28 stitches per 4 inches or 10 centimeters. And I believe that was the gauge that I had on here. I had 28. So I was able to use this booklet for 5 ply. And then what it does, it's really quite cool. It's kind of like the, there's a series of, well, there's a book, no, I think it's a series by, what's the author's name? Oh, I want to say Judd. I don't know if I've got that correct at all, but there's a series of books that essentially you just plug in your numbers, and this is exactly like that. So I've got jumper short sleeves, teach you how to do the sleeve, and then it says, all right, if you want 22 inches, 25, 28, 31, 34, so it's got all the different sizes across the top, and then it just tells you how many to cast on, how many rows to do, how many times you do the repeat, how many stitches you're going to have at that point, and then it tells you to continue with steps from over here. And it's all just, I really like the layout. It's very easy to use because at any point in time you can cross-reference how many stitches there should be and how many rows you should have, and the knitting machine has a row counter on it. So you just go until it says the number, and it's great. So I have the set and sleeves version for 5 ply and 3 ply, I think. Maybe I have 8 ply as well. And then I also have the raglan sleeves version for the same, and there might be a few other things here and there that I've got that are very similar to this, but this is a really good book. I think it would be handy as a like a hand knitting one too. All right, so essentially I just followed the instructions to do this sleeve, but I did run into a bit of an issue because I suffer from insomnia, especially around this time of year because we've got the change in seasons. And if I feel hot at night, then I wake up, and once I'm awake, I can't get back to sleep. And I've been waking up sometimes between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning, and then that's it. So I was really tired, and I realized it probably wasn't that smart, me trying to knit something that I'm only doing for the first time ever when I'm that tired, because it does require quite a bit of concentration to shape the sleeve without dropping stitches on this type of yarn. And I'm not sure if I did it exactly right either, because my edge is very tight. So I need to look into, I tried to make it not tight. I did my best, but it still came out tight. So I need to look at some ways of reducing the tightness on the edges. In the end, I worked out that I needed to hang weights from my knitting. I see a lot of people do that in other videos, and I didn't really know what it was for. But now I realise it kind of stops the knitting from jumping up and dropping stitches, because yeah, I drop stitches quite a few times, and it's really hard to fix on a knitting machine because you're actually working with the purl side facing you, and so normally if you were knitting by hand, you'd kind of turn it over to the knit side and then you'd use your crochet hook that way. But when you're on a knitting machine, you've got this little thing called a latch tool, which is kind of like the machine knitting equivalent of a crochet hook, but you have to kind of get in from behind in order to fix it, and it's really, really fiddly. And in the end, I ended up making too many mistakes and dropping stitches on the edges where I was decreasing, and I ended up having to rip the whole thing off, stick it on the knitting needles, tink back until I had fixed it all, and then rehang it. And then I was able to get some sleep and finish it off. So yeah, so that's happening. So I've got one sleeve and a body, and I'll have the other sleeve done soon enough, and then I'll have my first machine knitting project done. In the meantime though, as you saw on my piece of foam, I already started knitting another project, and I'm a bit of a sucker for punishment. So you can see this one. I like to challenge myself, and so I immediately started knitting a knitting pattern that has actual patterns in it rather than just plain stockinette, because like I said, I'm not really that keen on plain stockinette. And so with this one, what you have to do is every 9 stitches you need to drop all your stitches. So it's the repeat is 8 rows tall and 10 stitch repeat, but there's 9 stitches and then 8 rows worth of dropped stitches. And that turned out to be not too hard to do on the machine, but a little bit. It was actually a very good educational experience on the machine, because in order to do it, you have to have a spare needle that's not being used, but because it's in the middle of your work, like there's several of these patterns all the way across, you have to shuffle the existing stitches over before you can create the space to have the hole there. So, so every time there's a change in the pattern, I would essentially have to pull the needles out, or hooks out, I think they're called, use a tool. It might even be worthwhile me showing a little bit of footage, but I don't know if I did. Alright, I'll just show you up close. So this tool here, I don't know if you can see that. Alright, this tool here is a transfer tool, and that one does 2 stitches at once. There's one on the other side that does 1 stitch. Oop. And so essentially you've got to use that to take 2 stitches off and then transfer across, and I have to do that twice because the one set of holes is 4 stitches away from the other set of holes. So I've got to move the stitches over, create a new hole. And then this is what I was telling you about before. This thing's called a latch hook. You can see it's like, it looks like some kind of horrible surgical implement, but it's basically got a hook on one side and it's got this little, I don't even know what you call that, but essentially the way that it works with the knitting machine is the yarn sits behind this little piece that sticks out to stop it from getting in the way, and then you pull it through like it's a crochet, and then it closes, and the loop behind it slips over the top. So that's happening there. Anyway, so I had to, sorry, I was a bit tangled in my microphone there, having to use that tool every 8 rows to move things across so that then the holes would be in the right places. Yeah, so that ended up being a bit challenging. And then this, I don't have a ribber. So this section down the bottom here, this rib section, what I did was I knit 40 rows or so. I believe that's right, 40. And then I got that little latch hook tool and I individually dropped all the stitches and then latch hooked them back up, which was quite a long time, so it took a while. And then at the top here, this has been done in moss stitch, and you can't do moss stitch on a knitting machine, at least not on my knitting machine, because my knitting machine can only do purl stitches, and this moss stitch requires you to alternate purl and knit stitches. So I did those by hand. And once I got into the pattern, it didn't take as long as, I mean, the ribbing took ages, but once I got into the pattern, it didn't take as long as I thought. And essentially, I got all of that done in a week and a half, I'd like to say. And so now I'm ready for the other side. The other side's going to be a bit bigger piece. I didn't realise when I was planning the project, but the back piece is smaller than the front piece because the front piece has more of these little tabs. It's got one more, so it's going to be 12 stitches larger on the front, which was a little bit confusing. I didn't realise that, but I think it's going to be fine because it doesn't quite fit my template. I already played with the numbers a little bit to make it fit me. All right, so that's been happening. That's been on the needles, and my plan now is to do the other side of that one and to finish the sleeve, and so I should have a couple of projects that will be finished next time. Especially now that knitting on the machine, it's quite a lot faster, but I'm not wanting to use just machine knitting patterns. I want to still use the same patterns that I have and that I want to use from the vintage patterns because that's what I like to knit. And so I need to find ways to do that on the machine, even though the machine can't necessarily do all of the range of stitches. So I bought myself some books. So I got 2 books on machine knitting. Hand Knits by Machine by Susan Guagliumi, sorry, I'm butchering her name, Guagliumi, and Hand Manipulated Stitches for Machine Knitters. And so essentially, I'm hoping to be able to recreate the same hand knits as I would have been able to do by hand, if that makes sense, but on the machine. So I'm most likely going to take a lot longer than if I was machine knitting something that had been designed for a machine, but probably faster than if I was just hand knitting it. Oh, I forgot to say what that pattern was, the one that I just showed you. I have it on my phone. It's called something like With a New Slit Neckline. Just one moment. It's called With Fashionable Slit Neckline. And the pattern was from the 1930s. I'm not sure exactly which publication it's in. And the yarn that I've been using for that is this big cone, which I got from yarnsfromitaly.com, and it is %10 alpaca, 40% merino, and 50% acrylic. It's 700 meters per 100 grams and €25 per kilogram. And it's just called Sire Craft Mind C008. It's not really hugely helpful, but I found, so I've used other yarns from yarnsfromitaly.com, and they all seem to be called Saya Craft Mind, so that must be the brand of the actual yarn. But I've found their yarns to be quite affordable, and this yarn has actually been really nice to knit with because it's really fuzzy, and what I found was that if I did drop a stitch, it didn't drop more than like 1 or 2 stitches. In fact, when I was trying to do the ribbing, it was a pain because even if I pulled really hard, the stitches would get stuck and I'd have to use the tool to drop them down because they didn't want to drop on their own, which is nice when you're trying to learn a new skill and you have yarn that does not want to drop stitches. And I'm going to have heaps of yarn left over, so I'm thinking about what I want to do with it. I could do one of 2 things. I could either make a matching cardigan, so then I've got a twin set, which I haven't got any twin sets yet, so I'm liking that idea. Or the other idea, which I also really like, is I could make a skirt. And it depends on how much I've got left, because I'm not into mini skirts. If I'm going to wear a skirt, it's going to be below my knee. I prefer 1930s, 40s style, so it's going to be longer than below my knee, and I'm not sure if I've got enough yarn. So the cardigan might be the way to go. Alrighty, so those have been the machine knitting projects that I've been working on. I do also have so there's a knit along that's just started on a Facebook group called the Vintage Knitting Pattern Library. It is a closed group. It was open a little while ago, but now it's closed, so unfortunately you're unable to join if you haven't already. But if you are a member, they're doing a knit along for a pattern that uses variegated yarn, and I happen to have this variegated yarn already. I frogged my my very first podcast episode, I was saying that I was knitting the Ingrid sweater by Petite Knit, and I really didn't like it. It's not really my style. It's just too baggy on me. I like things to be fitted, and also I don't really like this colour on me. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to over dye the yarn because I just don't think it suits my complexion. It kind of, yeah, it just doesn't suit me very well. So I'm planning to over dye it like a dark green, and that should mean that the variegation will be less intense because I don't really like very intense variegation, although the original pattern was variegated. And but I'm just doing a swatch so that I can see whether I meet the gauge or not. That all said, even if I meet the gauge, I'll probably resize it to fit me anyway because I like to resize things to fit me better. But that's the third thing that's going to be happening on the machine. And for now, I'm just going to keep using this machine that's behind me. But like I mentioned 5-10 minutes ago, I actually got 2 new machines, and I was super excited when they arrived, well, when I picked them up, because they come with a ribber. So I'll still get them serviced. I'll go down to Barb Sew and Knits again and just get them all serviced because I think that's going to be much more efficient than me trying to learn how to do it, especially with my limited time. But I'll get them serviced and figure out how to use a ribber. And I think one is surplus to my needs, but I don't want to get rid of it because it looks so pretty. So I might take my camera down shortly and take some footage so that you can see what it looks like. But the one that's probably surplus to my needs is way prettier than the other one. So I'll probably just keep it. We'll see. I don't know that I need 3 machines, but I also like the one that I've got now. Even though it's a more basic machine, I like this one too. So yeah, I'll probably keep all 3. So I've gone from one being stashed under my stairs for 10 years, unused, to now having 3 machines. And again, 2 of them are going to be stashed under the stairs. So yes, I am so glad that my husband puts up with these crazy antics. Anyway, I went and he he was very good. He kidded me out. We got an IKEA table that has adjustable legs so that it can be a bit higher, which should help reduce back pain when being over a machine. And one thing though, even though it has been good to use the machine, I kind of miss actually just hanging out with him in the evening in front of the TV, because I used to do oil painting, and I stopped doing that because I wanted to hang out with him in the evenings. And now that I'm doing machine knitting, my machine's in a totally different part of the house, and so I'm not really watching the TV with him, and that was kind of our couples relaxation time together. But I am still doing some hand knitting as well, and I forgot to bring it with me, so I'm just going to go grab it. Actually, before I show you that, I told you I've been frogging the Ingrid sweater. I find frogged yarn so funny. It's just all the little crinkly bits. It's just, I don't know, it's just so cute. Obviously you can't really easily knit with it like that though. But I plan to, so I've skeined them up from frogging it, and I'm planning to over dye it now. But yes, they look so cute and stretchy. One thing though with that, I'm not sure how easy it's going to be, but I was knitting it with 2 strands at once, and this project that I just showed you is going to use 1 strand, so I need to basically unply my yarn because I've been knitting it together, so it will have twisted around itself. I might decide that it's not the right yarn for the project if that's going to be a pain, because I've tried to unply yarn that I've knitted together in the past before and it wasn't that easy. That said, it was wool plus mohair, but still acrylic, or not acrylic, that one's alpaca. So yeah, might not be much fun. Anywho, here's the hand knitting that I've been working on. Because, hang on, where am I up to? I still needed to have hand knitting projects because I still want to knit in the car, on the bus, if I'm ever on the bus, but I did go to the dentist a couple of weeks ago and I brought it with me, and just, you know, taking knitting places, going out with my knitting. So that's what I've been working on. Cover my face in case it's doing the autofocus thing. I really like this project. I can't wait for this one to be finished, but it's so slow. I've been working on this all year. I think I must have cast it on in March, maybe. I don't recall exactly. But I'm using a 3mm, oh actually no, I do remember. I cast it on when I went to a trade show in February. And that was when I was working on this ribbing at the trade show. So since February, that's many months, I'm using a 3mm needle. The yarn is 2-ply Jamieson's, no it's not Jamieson's, yeah sorry, it's Jamieson and Smith Shetland wool. And actually I do have the ball bands. I don't have the white, it's just the natural white. And the purple is FC9 mix of the 2-ply jumper weight, 100% Shetland wool. And I picked this because this is kind of like a Christmas jumper for me, although in Australia it's hot over Christmas, but in November we have all our jacarandas come out, and this is the perfect jacaranda colour. So for me, this is a Christmas colour. And I really want to wear it, but it's going to be a while before I can get it finished. I'm thinking if I play my cards right, which I might not because now that I've got my machines to play with, but I might be able to get it finished over the Christmas break because I'm not that far from the neckline. I've got a very, very tattered pattern. Oh, I think I've left my pattern in the other bag. I'll have to go find that actually. I'm not too far, I'm 11. I'm 11 rows from the neckline. I'm steeking it, so I've got some bridge stitches up the sides, if you can see that, I don't know. And I'm going to steek the neckline as well. And so I've got 11 more rows around till I get to the neckline, and then I will be reducing the stitch count at the neckline. And then I'll be finished the body, and then I've just got the 2 sleeves to do. The sleeves will still take a while, but I might be able to get it done over that Christmas period if I take some time off work. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I'm really, really looking forward to wearing it because I love it. It's so pretty. I can't wait to have it. I just can't wait to have the finished product. And this particular one was a 1940s pattern from a German booklet, and I don't know what the booklet name was, and I don't know how to speak or read German. I just used Google Translate and then I charted it myself. So I haven't really been going by the pattern itself. Oh, here's my booklet actually. Yes, so don't mind this, it's incredibly crumpled. I tend to just have these crumpled bits of paper. But I've just finished my second flower. So I've completed the second flower in full, so I'm like up to here. I don't know if you can see that at all, but I'm 2 flowers up. Yeah. And it should fit me great, I hope. I have measured it a few times, so it should fit. Cool bananas. This was the bit of paper that I put together for the slit neckline one. It's a very similar pattern for the back. It's just a different number of stitches. And I think that's pretty much all that I'm going to show you this time. But I will go and show you the new machines that I've got downstairs because I find them pretty exciting. They're I won't go into too much detail on it, but I just want to show you the colour. They're pretty interesting. So I will do that as well. All right, we're going into my rumpus room, which is in a bit of a mess at the moment. We've got a whole bunch of IKEA stuff that's just arrived too. But here are the new knitting machines. I'm not even sure how easy it's going to be for me to get into these to show you, but I want to just show you the colour of this Empissel one. Empissel is basically Singer, but look at this. You wouldn't believe how excited I was when I opened this box. The chrome on the side is so shiny and the logo is so pretty. I'm not going to open the whole box because, like I said, there's bits of IKEA everywhere, but there's also a Singer machine under there as well. That one is a punch card machine, and I don't know what the Empissel one is, but I think it's more modern than the one that I've got. And then it comes with 2 ribbers, so those are ribbers there. And under all this IKEA stuff here is a big box of wool that I got. So let's see. Moving the IKEA chair. I ended up with all this wool thrown in for free with the machines. And there's some nice stuff in here actually. Like, I quite like this dark green. Some of it's kind of vintage, circa 70s, 80s, patternile. Sorry about the, yeah, this patternile looks really 70s, doesn't it? I've put it all in plastic bags anyway. Well, actually most of it was in plastic bags already, but I just went through it and got rid of anything that I didn't think I was going to use. Patterns Totem. So I think that's probably 80s. Oh, this colour here looks so 70s. Look at this. Screaming orange. Who doesn't want a screaming orange garment in their life? Anyway, so that's happening. But wait, there's more. In addition to that huge tub of wool and those 2 machines, it also came with a big tub of patterns. Yeah, so this is the box that I got. Oh, there's a whole bunch of patterns in there from the 70s. Oh, that's a hand knitting one. Manuals. Tension charts. More of those like booklets that I showed you before. 8-ply, 3-ply book. Punch cards. And then loads of patterns, although those ones are Toyota. Pants and skirts. I was thinking I could make myself a pair of pants. The best ones I think are the Empasol booklets, but these are all kind of 1970s. This lady here reminds me of the lady who was modelling a whole bunch of our knits in Knitting with Betty podcast a couple of months ago. All these kind of 1970s patterns. I'm probably not really going to knit any of these though, because I don't really like 1970s patterns, but it's been fun going through them all. And this is the machine that I've been using. I really like the colours of this thing, and they go perfectly with the curtain that I've got, which is like exactly the same colour. So I kind of don't want to get rid of this one because I really love this one as well. I love the blue one, but it's going to clash with the curtains. And this one's cool. But yeah, fairly standard machine. It's just a basic one. So this one is a Singer, what do they call it? It's a 305 automatic. Oh, here we go. Mod 305 automatic. And it doesn't really do that much automatic, but that's what they were called in the day. So this model was from 1971. Well, thanks so much guys for putting up with the bits and bobs of material all smushed in together at different times. Sometimes I've only got a little bit of time to record, so thanks for that. And really nice to get a chance to chat with you again. Looking forward to speaking with you all. Please like and subscribe so then others can find this channel if they're into vintage knitting. And I hope to see you all again soon. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. See you later.